Animator, we don't need no chickens.
No chickens.
We are on top of it. Thank you very much for being here. This has been a big week for you, obviously. As I think most folks here know, you had an opportunity to speak directly with the president-elect and talk about the needs of your city going forward. As, of course, we all know, the president-elect has said that he has a big investment plan for infrastructure. And this city, certainly, you have requests.
Absolutely, we will.
So let's talk first about that. Did he make you any guarantees? Did he make you any promises, particularly with respect to Metro? Do you have assurance that this next administration is really going to put that investment into this city?
Well, my first goal in meeting with the president-elect is to make sure he knows who we are as a city, county, state, how we operate, and make sure he understands the unique structure of Washington, D.C., what we are and what we're not. There are a lot of misconceptions about our city. As I travel around, even as I listened intently throughout the debate over the last year, it was clear to me that my first order of business with the president-elect is to let him know that we are an independent, self-governing jurisdiction, 21...
Without statehood.
Without statehood, that is for sure, but with home rule that we and he needs to protect and respect. And so with that, we talked about how our city is really growing. Our economy is booming. We're attracting economic development. We're attracting people and businesses, and we want to stay on that path. So he is familiar with Washington, D.C. It's a big investment here, so I think they've spent several of the last years really focused on D.C., and that was my first order of business. Now, Metro, I know you had an earlier conversation about Metro, and I wanted him also to understand what the federal interest in Metro is. We are different than New York City. We're different than Chicago and other cities in that our system is the nation's system. It carries 43% during the commute times. 43% of the riders are federal workers. 20 million people come to Washington, D.C. every year to visit our nation's monuments. So we are a different system, and the federal government has a different responsibility. So I wanted them to be clear of what our system is, the federal role in maintaining Metro and its vitality, not just for Washington, D.C., but for the region and the nation.
So he heard you.
Absolutely.
But did he offer you anything? Did he guarantee you anything?
Well, we already have a meeting set up with his nominee for the Department of Transportation, which is very important to us. And then we'll get down into the nitty-gritty of what we need. You heard Terry talking a little bit earlier. Metro is a compact, and it's a compact between Maryland, Virginia, Washington, D.C., and the federal government. Now, Maryland, Virginia, and Washington, D.C. pay about an equal share. The federal government pays about that much. And so we need the federal government to pay its fair share, and we all are committed to Metro having a plan. But let's not be mistaken that we already know what the needs are. We know what the financial needs are, and we know that once and for all, we're going to need to have a dedicated funding stream among the jurisdictions and a more robust commitment from the federal government to really get Metro to where it is.
And do you believe that he agrees with you? Do you believe he's willing to make that commitment?
I believe that he knows what the problem is now because I told him what our issues are, and we're going to work with his transportation director. I think that we have a very good shot at talking with the Department of Transportation and having all of the jurisdictions get together with the federal government.
Let's then talk about some of the proposals that have been made. I mean, people have suggested even turning it over to a federal panel, creating another voice. After all, we have been through an awful lot with Metro, and as a Red Line rider, I'll tell you, we've had a time of it. And the Safe Track thing, we've had a time of it. So what about turning it over? What about if that would guarantee you more funding?
I don't have any reason to believe that the federal government knows how to run a transportation system. I don't know if we have any examples of how they are running a subway and it's excellent and it's on time and it's safe. So I don't know that they have that experience. And I do believe that the four parties can come to many agreements to get us to dedicated funding. And if that means some changes in governance, we would certainly entertain it. I see a longer range and a bigger ask of the federal government. I believe that we can deal with our dedicated funding, safety and reliability issues with a committed manager and with funders that are willing to step up to the plate, DC, Maryland, and Virginia, and the federal government. But Metro does have a deeper issue in terms of about a $2 billion unfunded pension liability. And when you start talking about a big problem like that, I think that's going to require a bigger partnership from the federal government.
And that's a longer term problem than the thing we're feeling right now.
The things we're feeling right now, we can accomplish with commitments from the four of us. Dealing long term with that pension liability, that may take a federal intervention.
All right, so where we are today in Safe Track and everything else, where you've been losing an awful lot of folks from Metro. A lot of people are turned off.
They're on the roads.
They're on the roads.
Yes, we know.
They're on the roads.
Yes.
They've gotten off the train. What do you do to bring them back?
Well, you heard Terry talk a little bit about the commitment of the general manager, and I think that all of the funding agencies are committed to his expertise and vision towards getting things done. It is up to us, however, to hold him accountable and make sure we understand. When we say we have Safe Track and all of our riders are being inconvenienced, I have to also be able to say it's working. And at the end of Safe Track, we will be in what he calls a state of getting better or state of good, but we have to get to a state of excellence. And that's going to take a longer commitment to that regular maintenance and the funding that's required to get us there.
Yeah, but it seems like you've got a bad cycle going here. If you've got a decline in ridership, you have a decline in revenue.
The only way to get people back is to fix the system and make it more reliable. It didn't decline overnight, and it's not going to turn around overnight. But we have to stay the course and be committed to turning it around.
But it has declined precipitously in the recent months.
Well, when you have less service, you will have less riders. And one thing that we have been very steadfast in saying to the authority is that we pay a lot. Metro is my fourth largest agency. After schools and healthcare and police, it's Metro. It's the fourth largest payment that the district makes, and it's that critical to how our city functions. But while it's rebuilding, what we cannot tolerate is such a further decline in service that you will forever lose people. And that's why when we look at this budget, for example, that the general manager just presented, it includes making the headways even longer. It includes cutting hours even further. And we, as the district, stepped up to say, when I talk about not decreasing hours, and when I talk about not decreasing headways, I'm willing to pay more for those things. Because if we have a system, even as it's rebuilding and getting safer, but it doesn't serve the needs of our people, it's useless.
You know, it does, however, open up the opportunities for other, say, private approaches to transportation, to what we consider public transportation. It's going to open the opportunity. In the months of Safe Track, it's...
Well, certainly it is, but I think most people have found out that there's no profit in public transportation. It's hard. And so that's why it's a real public good. We don't make any money on it, that's for sure, and we contribute and we subsidize just about every ride that there is on Metro. What we've seen during Safe Track and people leaving, some of them are going to their private vehicles, some of them are taking Uber and Lyft, some of them are riding their bikes, which we continue to expand in Washington, D.C., and try to make it easier. But that is not the long-term solution. Public transportation transportation is a lifeline for many people. It's not a luxury, it's a necessity. It's how they connect themselves to their jobs, to doctors, to churches, to their lives. And so we in Washington are committed to making sure we have that lifeline. But it's more than that for us. We are expecting in this region to grow by 4 million people. In Washington, D.C. alone by 200,000 people. And we're not going to grow any more roads in D.C. So we have to make sure that the capacity that we have is being used to its best.
You talk about that, that place where the city can do something that only government can do.
That's right.
Serve in a way only a government can serve. Even though we are seeing in other places in the country sort of that interest and need for these private operations to come up and suck out. I mean, can you speak to what you have to convince this administration of? That the needs of this city have to be to protect those people who otherwise would not have that kind of transportation.
Well, to talk about how we want to attract private interest, and what we have certainly, like all cities and even the federal government, I think, recognizes is that our infrastructure needs greatly outstrip our ability to pay just from taxpayers. And so it is incumbent upon us to be creative about how we finance these projects. A couple of years ago, when I was a member of the Council of the District of Columbia, I authored our public-private partnership authorizing legislation. We put those rules in place in the last couple of years, and just a couple of weeks ago, we announced our first list of projects. Now, these didn't squarely fall into the transportation bucket, but we are inviting private interest in how we're going to rebuild our municipal buildings, how we're going to transform our street light infrastructure, for example. And those are very important ways that cities have to work with the private sector to get some of these projects done, so we're not just going to the taxpayers.
Of course, Metro is top of mind for many of us here in the city, but what about those other kinds of projects, say the waterfront? I mean, things are happening out here that need investment as well, beyond what we're thinking about.
Oh, we don't lack for investment in Washington, D.C. If you go around our city, and I'm not one to count cranes, but people like to count cranes, and we have probably the most cranes than any
Let's
city.
take a look out the window.
Over 50 cranes, I think we have in the air right now. But what that really represents, a lot of private investment. The wharf project that you mentioned, it's been long coming, but next year we're going to deliver 3 hotels. We're going to deliver housing, and a good chunk of it is affordable housing and commercial opportunities, and a great opportunity to connect to the wharf. We have some transportation, a private transportation option there, because we're going to launch a water taxi between Washington, D.C., Virginia, and Maryland, which will be, we think, eventually a commute option, but it will definitely connect for tourists. And we have been very focused on not just development in the core of our city, but in the under-resourced areas of our city as well. So we are, in the next 2 years, going to deliver 2 entertainment complexes, one for soccer, one for the Wizards, and they're both in areas that are underinvested in right now.
So what does that mean for the communities? And do you really believe that in these neighborhoods you're going to generate an opportunity for those communities that are currently, as you say, under-resourced?
Oh, I know we are.
And
I know we are.
Without driving them away.
It is a balance, and we haven't done it as well in I would say in the last 10 or 15 years to prepare neighborhoods for huge investment. One of our biggest issues as a city is affordable housing, because we have seen with 1,000 people that move here every month, you can imagine what happens to the pressure on housing prices. They're gone through the roof. So one of our major initiatives is investing in preserving and creating more affordable housing. And when we talk about infrastructure and infrastructure investment in D.C., we always include our affordable housing stock. And some of it, quite frankly, is federally owned public housing. And there's been real the federal government has basically walked away from public housing and how to maintain it. So cities are having to figure out how we preserve those units and invest in those units.
So it sounds to me like you could have shown up at Trump Tower with a pretty long list of asks. Did you? Were there specific demands that you made or requests that you make of it?
Well, it was a private meeting. And part of having a new relationship and a new dialogue is to build a level of trust. So I won't say all of the things that we talked about, but I will say that we certainly went in, as I mentioned earlier, with the goal of saying, don't confuse Washington, D.C. with some other type of taking jurisdiction that doesn't pay its own way, because we pay our own way. And also that we do have big issues that he's talked about along his campaign that I know will be areas for common ground. Education, we are very proud and have been a model for the nation of how to have a real commitment to traditional public schools, to charter schools, and to make sure families have choice. And that is a real commitment that we have made. The infrastructure issues, especially as it relates to federal transportation interest in the city, has been paramount as well. But then, quite frankly, also being able to say, everybody knows where Washington, D.C. was on November the 8th, right? I'll tell you, we voted 80% for statehood. 80% of Washingtonians said that the current makeup of us paying taxes and not having representation is not our future.
So you asked him to consider supporting your interest in statehood?
Of course. Statehood.
And he responded?
As I said, I'm not going to talk about the
Well, you can't blame a girl for asking.
But I will say that certainly is number one on our list.
It was number one on your list. Did he say anything to you that would have surprised us? Something that he perhaps did not know about the structure of the government and its relationship?
Well, I will.
Come on, give me a chance to push her, right?
Let me just say this: that I talked to him about my own transition. Because as I've watched him, just 2 years ago, we were in, it's not going into the White House, but when you are a chief executive and you have a limited time to form your government, there are similar steps and similar thoughts that you're thinking about. And I will say, I think he was surprised to know that I appoint 77 people to run a 33,000 person government, that I have control of the schools and the police department, and we're not like other cities, but we have city and county and state functions. And that became, I think I saw like a light bulb go off in his head in understanding how we function as a city. What people might be surprised about, I was a little surprised that Trump Tower isn't laid out in gold. It's kind of just his office building, and he was in his office and working on his transition.
The walls weren't gilded, or?
Not at all. It was, I would say his office isn't as nice as my office.
Well, you better watch out. He might come looking. Going, though, into, you heard Governor McAuliffe talk about the things that he wanted to put on the table. Going forward, and I do have to get you to respond to his comment that he was the greatest representative for Metro. But
that's not true.
Well, since he's out of the room now.
Well, he knows it. I would say it if he was in the room.
But he has made it clear that he showed up with some asks. Are there specific things that you must get from this government?
From the new president? Yes, I think all states, there are a lot of things that are heavy on our minds, and when I have my team, for example, looking, and I just asked all my agency directors, what's been said on the campaign trail, some of the stated policies of the president-elect. What are our opportunities and where are we vulnerable? And we're looking at that by department. I think if I had to put a dollar figure on our biggest vulnerability, it's around the Affordable Care Act. We have many people in Washington who didn't have insurance before, who have insurance now, and they're sick. these are people who couldn't get insurance, and even if insurance was available, they wouldn't be able to pay for it. We estimate that's about a $400 million vulnerability for us. So that's really huge. We're concerned about some criminal justice issues and not wanting to roll back in the area of criminal justice. We're very concerned about any pressures on us to focus on federal policies, and that is not the policy of the District of Columbia. Our police are for D.C. laws and D.C. issues and to protect and serve D.C. residents. So we'll push back hard on that. So there's a lot of things that that we are looking at as a big concern. But keep this in mind: this is not the first Republican president, and we have worked with Republican presidents as a city and actually gotten some things done with Republican presidents. We have a program, for example, in education called DC TAG, where Republican Congress and actually, I think it started under Clinton, but it worked with a part of the Republican Congress.
This has to do with funding higher education, college.
Funding higher education, and we obviously want that to continue. And so those are some things that we will continue to partner with the feds on.
Just to clarify what the TAG is.
TAG allows our students to go to any public college or university at the in-state tuition rate. And it provides a small scholarship to make up the difference. So our students like it because it makes college affordable for places all across the country. Members of Congress like it because it attracts D.C. residents to their states and to their state colleges and universities. And quite frankly, it's a big boom for the city in that people know if they live here, they get this extra benefit when their kids go to college.
But there have been efforts, suggestions that maybe it's time to pull that supplement down.
Actually, I think that members of Congress like it a lot, and it's had bipartisan support. President Obama has certainly put a big marker on it, and it's been supported in the Congress. So we just want to make sure that people keep that in mind.
And the president-elect as well.
Absolutely.
And was he aware of these investments?
Well, I will say he was particularly aware of D.C. education reform efforts. You've probably read that he had a discussion with Michelle Rhee. So he knows about D.C. and public education reform and how much we've invested in it, and calling out particularly what would appear in his budget, like TAG and SOAR, which is another three-part investment that the feds help us with, was important. And I wouldn't expect him to know every detail of that.
But you're going to make sure he hears from you
Absolutely.
as well in the coming months, all right? I do want to thank you for participating in this conversation.
My pleasure.
I know that I pushed you a little bit on that, but
that's okay.
I think it's important. I think it's important for you to be able to tell us that the city is going to demand as much as it can in terms of support from the federal government.
Well, we always have, and we have had a great relationship with President Obama, but there are many opportunities that we have with the next president, too.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you.
Thank you.